Hello, everybody. We are ready to start a new book. It is The Tiger Rising. You'll notice the author is Kate DiCamillo. That is the same person who wrote the book The Tale of Despero, which we read earlier this year. Chapter 1. That morning, after he discovered the tiger, Rob went and stood under the Kentucky Star Motel sign and waited for the school bus, just like it was any other day. The Kentucky Star sign was composed of a yellow neon star that rose and fell over a piece of blue neon in the shape of the state of Kentucky. Rob liked the sign. He harbored a dim but abiding notion that it would bring him good luck. Finding the tiger had been luck, he knew that. He had been out in the woods, behind the Kentucky Star Motel, way out in the woods, not really looking for anything, just wandering, hoping that maybe he would get lost or get eaten by a bear and not have to go to school ever again. That's when he saw the old Beauchamp gas station building, all boarded up and tumbling down. And next to it, there was a cage. And inside the cage, unbelievably, there was a tiger, a real life, very large tiger, pacing back and forth. He was orange and gold and so bright it was like staring at the sun itself, angry and trapped in a cage. It was early morning, and it looked like it might rain. It had been raining every day for almost 2 weeks. The sky was gray, and the air was thick and still. Fog was hugging the ground. To Rob, it seemed as if the tiger was some magic trick, rising out of the mist. He was so astonished at his discovery, so amazed that he just stood and stared. But only for a moment. He was afraid to look at the tiger for too long, afraid that the tiger would disappear. He stared, and then he turned and ran back into the woods toward the Kentucky Star and the way home. While his brain doubted what he had seen, his heart beat out the rhythm of the truth to him. Tiger, tiger, tiger. That was what Rob thought about as he stood beneath the Kentucky Star sign and waited for the bus. The tiger. He did not think about the rash on his legs, the itchy red blisters that snaked their way into his shoes. His father said it would be less likely to itch if he didn't think about it. And he did not think about his mother. He hadn't thought about her since the morning of the funeral, the morning he couldn't stop crying, his great heaving sobs that made his chest and his stomach hurt. His father, watching him, standing beside him, had started to cry too. They were both dressed up in their suits that day. His father's suit was too small, and when he slapped Rob to make him stop crying, he ripped a hole underneath the arm of his jacket. Ain't no point in crying, his father had said afterwards. Crying ain't going to bring her back. It had been 6 months since that day, 6 months since he and his father had moved from Jacksonville to Lister, and Rob had not cried once since. Not once. The final thing he did not think about that morning was getting on the bus. He specifically did not think about Norton and Billy Thermonger waiting for him like chained and starved guard dogs, eager to attack. Rob had a way of not thinking about things. He imagined himself as a suitcase that was too full, like the one that he had packed when they had left Jacksonville after the funeral. He made all of his feelings go inside the suitcase and he stuffed them tight, and then he sat on the suitcase and locked it shut. That was his way of not thinking about things. Sometimes it was hard to keep the suitcase shut, but now he had something to put on top of it. The tiger. And so he waited for the bus under the Kentucky Star sign, and as the first drops of rain fell from the solemn sky, Rob imagined the tiger on top of his suitcase, blinking his golden eyes, sitting proud and strong, unaffected by all those not thoughts inside, straining to come out. Chapter 2. Looky here, said Norton Threemonger as soon as Rob stepped onto the bus. It's the Kentucky Star. How's it feel to be a star? Norton stood in the center of the aisle, blocking Rob's path. Rob shrugged. Oh, I don't know, Norm called to his brother. Oh, he don't know. Hey, Billy, he don't know what it's like to be a star. Rob slipped past Norton. He walked all the way to the back of the bus and sat down in the last seat. Hey, said Billy Thermonger, you know what? This ain't Kentucky. This is Florida. He followed Rob and he sat down right next to him. He pushed his face so close that Rob could smell his breath. It was bad breath. It smelled metallic and rotten. You ain't a Kentucky star, Billy said, his eyes glowing under the brim of his John Deere cap. And you sure ain't a star here in Florida. You ain't a star nowhere. Okay, said Rob. Billy shoved him hard, and then Norton came swaggering back and leaned over Billy and grabbed hold of Rob's hair with one hand, and with the other hand ground his knuckles into Rob's scalp. Rob sat there and he took it. If he fought back, it lasted longer. If he didn't fight back, sometimes they got bored and left him alone. They were the only 3 kids on the bus until it got to town, and Mr. Nelson, the driver, pretended like he didn't know what was going on. He drove staring straight ahead, whistling songs that didn't have any melody. Rob was on his own, and he knew it. He's got the creeping crud all over him, said Billy. He pointed at Rob's legs. Look, he said to Norton, ain't it gross? Uh-huh, said Norton. He was concentrating on grinding his knuckles into Rob's head. It hurt, but Rob didn't cry. He never cried. He was a pro at not crying. He was the best not crier in the whole world. It drove Norton and Billy Thermonger wild. And today Rob had the extra power of a tiger. All he had to do was think about it, and he knew there was no way he would cry. Not ever. They were still out in the country, only halfway into the town when the bus lurched to a stop. This was such a surprising development to have the bus stop halfway through its route that Norton stopped grinding his knuckles into Rob's scalp and Billy stopped punching Rob in the arm. Hey, Mr. Nelson, Norton shouted. What you doing? This ain't a stop, Mr. Nelson, Billy called out helpfully. But Mr. Nelson ignored them. He kept whistling his non-song as he swung open the bus door, and while Norton and Billy and Rob watched, open-mouthed and silent, a girl with yellow hair and a pink lacy dress walked up the steps and onto the bus. Chapter 3. Nobody wore pink lacy dresses to school. Nobody. Even Rob knew that. He held his breath as he watched a girl walk down the aisle of the bus. Here was somebody even stranger than he was. He was sure. Hey, Norton called. This is a school bus. I know it is, the girl said. Her voice was gravelly and deep. The words sounded clipped and strange, like she was stamping each one of them out with a cookie cutter. You're all dressed up to go to a party, Billy said. This ain't the party bus. Wait, there's a bug on my computer. Got him. He elbowed Rob in the ribs. Ha ha ha, Norton laughed. He gave Rob a friendly thud on the head. The girl stood in the center of the aisle, swaying with the movement of the bus. She stared at them. It's not my fault you don't have good clothes, she said finally, and she sat down with her back to them. Hey, said Norton. We're sorry. We didn't mean nothing. Hey, he said again. What's your name? The girl turned and looked back at them. She had a sharp nose and a sharp chin and black, black eyes. Sistine, she said. Sistine, hooted Billy. What kind of a stupid name is that? Like the chapel, she said slowly, making each word strong and clear. Rob stared at her in amazement. What are you looking at? She said to him. Rob shook his head. Yeah, said Norton. He cuffed Rob on the ear. What are you staring at, disease boy? Come on, he said to Billy. And together they swaggered up the aisle of the bus, and they sat in the seat behind the new girl. They whispered things to her, but Rob couldn't hear what they were saying. He thought about the Sistine Chapel. He had seen a picture of it in a big art book that Mrs. Dupree kept on the shelf behind her desk in the library. The pages of the book were slick and shiny, and each picture made Rob feel cool and sweet inside like a drink of water on a hot day. Mrs. Dupree let Rob look at the book because he was quiet and good in the library. It was her reward to him. In the book, the picture from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel showed God reaching out and touching Adam. It was like they were playing a game of tag, like God was making Adam it. It was a beautiful picture. Rob looked out the window at the gray rain and the gray sky and the gray highway. He thought about the tiger. He thought about God and Adam. And he thought about Sistine. He did not think about the rash. He did not think about his mother. And he did not think about Norton and Billy Thermonger. He kept his suitcase closed. Chapter 4. Sistine was in Rob's 6th grade homeroom. Mrs. Soames made her stand up and introduce herself. My name, she said in a gravelly voice, is Sistine Bailey. She stood at the front of the room in her pink dress. All the kids stared at her with open mouths as if she had just stepped off a spaceship from another planet. Rob looked down at his desk. He knew not to stare at her. He started working on a drawing of a tiger. "What a lovely name," said Mrs. Soames. "Thank you," said Sistine. Patrice Wilkins, who sat in front of Rob, snorted and then giggled and then covered her mouth. "I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania," Sistine said, "home of the Liberty Bell. And I hate the South because the people in it are ignorant. And I am not staying here in Lister. My father is coming to get me next week." She looked around the room defiantly. "Well," said Mrs. Soames, "thank you very much for introducing yourself, Sistine Bailey. You may take your seat before you put your foot in your mouth any farther." The whole class laughed at that. Rob looked up just as Sistine sat down, and she glared at him. And then she stuck her tongue out at him. "Him!" He shook his head and he went back to his drawing. He sketched out the tiger, but what he wanted to do was whittle it in wood. His mother had shown him how to whittle, how to take a piece of wood and make it come alive. She had taught him when she was sick. He sat on the edge of the bed and watched her tiny white hands closely. "Don't jiggle that bed," his father said. "Your mamma is in a lot of pain." "He ain't hurting me, Robert," his mother said. "Don't get all tired out with that wood," his father said. "It's all right," his mother said. "I'm just teaching Rob some things I know." But she said she didn't have to teach him much. His mother told him that he already knew what to do. His hands knew. That's what she said. "Rob," said the teacher, "I need you to go to the principal's office." Rob didn't hear her. He was working on the tiger, trying to remember what the eyes looked like. "Robert," Mrs. Soames said. "Robert Horton." Rob looked up. Robert was his father's name. Robert was what his mother had called his father. "Mr. Flilmer wants to see you in his office. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," said Rob. He got up and took his picture of the tiger and folded it and put it in the back pocket of his shorts. On his way out of the classroom, Jason Utmeyer tripped him and said, "See you later, retard." And Sistine looked up at him with her tiny black eyes, and she shot him a look of pure hate. And that's the end of chapter 4.